What's up, everyone? Carolina Girl here. Welcome back to my channel. It's Sunday, February 15th, 2026. I hope everyone had a great Valentine's Day yesterday. I never really got into Valentine's Day. I think the only ones that really make out on that day are Hallmark, the florist, the candy shops, and the restaurants. I believe if you have a special someone in your life, every day should be Valentine's Day, not just one specific day of the year. I'm coming to you guys tonight because I want to talk to you about a few clips from a couple of lives that have happened within this past week. Most of the clips kind of revolve around the expert witnesses in Gypsy's case, and that's what my thumbnail somewhat, reflects. Is I said so-called witnesses, and I'm not trying to, or so-called expert witnesses, and I'm not trying to disrespect the expert witnesses in this case, but I do have an opinion about them. And so I just want to talk to you guys about it. And I've touched on this before, but I feel like this needs a video to itself, and maybe you guys will see why, or I hope you guys see why. But I first wanted to share this one screenshot of Gypsy's statement regarding content creators talking about Munchausen's by proxy. It says, listening to Gypverse creators explain Munchausen by proxy it's like watching someone read a Wikipedia headline and suddenly think they're a specialist. Stick to the people who actually have a degree from a prestige university. It's supposed to be prestigious university, but hey. And ignore the noise from people cosplaying as professionals whose entire resume is, I made a YouTube video about it. So I guess, you shouldn't really listen to what I have to say, because my entire resume is, I made a YouTube video about it. Because I surely don't have doctor in front of my name or MD behind it. But I feel like I'm just as qualified to give an opinion about this case as the experts are in this case. The first clip that I want to play for you is why I feel the need to keep exposing Gypsy.
Don't want to know the truth about Gypsy's actual crime doesn't mean that other people aren't interested in it. I know that's y'all friend. I know
It's not
y'all.
that, Key. It just doesn't matter. Like, it's over and done.
Okay,
Key,
it doesn't matter for you guys.
you got a
But some
great
people,
deal. I would have
you
taken
got a
that
lot
deal
of people
had
that
I
are
been
really
her.
interested.
I'm going to just pause it there. This is Key talking to Sheena and Rogie on her panel this past Tuesday. Now, Sheena and Rogie are, of course, pro-Gypsy people. Sheena has, in fact, she's like, it was kind of like Bree and then Sheena. And so now it's, Sheena. And Rogie is pro-Gypsy as well. They're both personal friends of Gypsy. And so Sheena states that the FOIA information just doesn't matter because the case is closed. And Sheena, you're correct. The case is closed. This isn't about Gypsy going back to prison, though. This isn't even about trying to stop your friendship with her. I could really care less who she's friends with. This has to do with getting the truth out there, because whether you choose to see it or not, Gypsy's a liar. So let's continue on.
Can I just finish a sentence?
Go ahead.
There are a lot of people on here who are into a lot of true crime stuff. I'm not one of them. This crime was enough for me. Y'all traumatized the shit out of me. But a lot of people want to get the information and the actual evidence and facts on this. And just because you guys don't, because you're all friends with her, that's okay too. That's fine too. But the people
you want to hear the facts of the crime, Key?
Yeah. I've seen a lot of
you
people talking about
facts?
it. I don't want to hear it. I want to see it. And Starlight and Becca Scoops actually show it. You don't show anything, Rogie.
Let's talk about the simple facts, though. Gypsy Rose Blanchard asked Nicholas Godejohn to unalive her mama. Nicholas Godejohn came to her house, unalived her mother. They ran to Wisconsin. They got caught. They got brought back to Missouri. They was both gonna stand trial. And a year later, a year after this murder, Gypsy took a plea deal, and 2 years after the
I don't like how you're leaving out the fact that
I'm
Gypsy
sorry.
Rose
I'm sorry. My
Blanchard.
brother was
Hold
calling me.
on, you're
Hold on.
leaving out the fact that Gypsy
Oh,
Rose Blanchard manipulated a man with
you didn't let me
autism
finish.
into doing that, and she also mailed a murder weapon over state lines,
You
which is a
didn't let me
federal
finish the
crime.
story.
That's
You
a
didn't let me
federal
finish the
crime
story.
because
They
you're
was
leaving a lot of things out.
I'm
So
telling you the
hold on, and
facts of the
I'll
story.
show you something in a
They was
second.
No,
toxic.
it's not that
They
cut
was
and dry, Rogie. It's
We
not.
they
know
was
the
in a
story,
toxic
Rosie. What the
relationship.
fuck are you
They was
talking
definitely in
about?
a
We know
toxic.
the
They
story.
was they was definitely in a toxic
She paid for
relationship.
him to get there. This is murder for hire. First off, she paid for his hotel room, paid for the food, paid for their bus tickets back. She mailed a deadly murder weapon over state lines, and then
See, this is the problem when we try and talk about Gypsy with the pro Gypsy people. The pro Gypsy side always wants to bring Nick's case into it. Even though they were co defendants, it's two separate cases, and I'm not trying to argue Nick's case. He's in prison for the rest of his life and he's not getting out. The problem is that Gypsy has lied for 10 years, and the evidence that's coming out now reflects that. No, she won't go back to prison, but she needs to stop villainizing her mother. Dee Dee wasn't the monster, Gypsy was. This next clip is of me about a week ago. I was over there on TikTok watching Quiche. She's another anti-gyp creator, but she's primarily over there on TikTok. She's been around as long as I can remember. She's been around as long as I've been around, but she's primarily over there on TikTok. And she was live on over there, and I was watching, and Rogie went up on her panel. And when he first went up on her panel, they weren't discussing Gypsy, but as time went on, they ended up discussing her. And so this is me talking to Rogie about the expert witnesses.
Yeah. I came up on the panel because you said something about the experts in Gypsy's case regarding her medical records. Do you know who Dr. Mark Feldman is?
Yeah, I know the name.
Did you watch Mommy Dead and Dearest?
No.
He was actually in that documentary. That's actually Gypsy's documentary. That was one of the first documentaries that came out in this case, and it's in her favor, okay? He was on that. He literally said he never looked at her medical records. He actually researched the internet, just like we all have on this case. That's how he researched this case. He never looked at her medical records. He's the leading expert in Munchausen's by proxy, and he never looked at her medical records.
Okay, he said that. Okay, so you're taking that.
In Mommy Dead and Dearest.
Yes,
Go watch
yes.
Mommy Dead and Dearest.
That was when. Can anybody tell me when that came out?
It came out May 2017.
17. So the crime happened in 15. So 2 years after the crime.
And so this is actually when Mommy Dead and Dearest came out. It premiered on HBO on May 16th, 2017. Okay. And this is Gypsy explaining how things went down filming Mommy Dead and Dearest.
My first documentary was Erin Lee Carr's HBO Mommy Dead and Dearest. And that was already being filmed when I took my plea deal. So it was kind of like everybody had done their interview. My parents did their interview. It was already being made as I was going through my trial, or not trial, but court proceedings. All that was left was for me to speak. So on the day that I got sentenced, I gave my interview to that, and I never got to watch it until I was released.
And so let me remind you what her first words were when she sat down with the producer of Mommy Dead and Dearest.
This is actually kind of the first time I've been honest. Besides being honest, with my attorneys, even that I haven't been completely honest with them. So
How would you?
Right here. She just got done accepting her plea deal, and she admitted on national television that she wasn't even honest with her attorneys. She just got done accepting her plea deal, folks. And she just got done saying that she wasn't even honest with her attorneys. And so she's sitting down. She's doing her interview now for Mommy, Dead, and Dearest. Everybody else has already recorded their interview to include Dr. Mark Feldman. Okay, let's go back to the clip with Mr. Rogie.
And I thought it came out before. Hold on, I thought it came out before her plea deal because she got her plea deal in 2016.
Correct.
It was filmed before her plea deal.
She took her plea deal July 5th, 2016.
She signed papers to do the documentary before her plea deal.
She actually interviewed. She gave her interview for Mommy, Dead, and Dearest right after her plea deal. I've got the clip of her saying, I wasn't even honest with my attorneys. She did that right after her plea deal.
I would want to know if that was before he researched the case because he didn't stop researching the case until he got the call that they was not going to trial. He was ready.
That was
I'm sorry.
Mark Feldman.
Dr. Feldman, okay.
Dr. Mark Feldman. That was
Dr. Fabian. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. Okay.
Dr. Mark Feldman is the one that Bree loves to say, oh, he's the leading expert. He never.
Okay. I needed to pause it right there because he got confused because when he said that he never stopped researching the case up until they were supposed to go to trial or whatever he said. He was actually talking about Dr. John Fabian. Okay. This is Dr. John Fabian. And so that's who Rogie was actually referring to there. And I was like, no, you're talking about Dr. John Fabian. I'm referring to Dr. Mark Feldman. And so that's where we got confused. But while we're on Dr. John Fabian, let me go ahead and play his clip, and he can tell you who
witness in the court and court system in around the country, different states, and typically evaluate defendants again for mental illness defenses or sentencing, mitigating circumstances in sentencing proceedings. So when I had worked with Gypsy Rose's attorney in different cases in the state of Missouri, Mike Stanfield, and he had contacted me, right around the time all of this happened, and said, John, you won't believe, what kind of case we have up here. We think it's a Munchausen, by proxy case. Never seen anything like it. Want you to come and evaluate who we think is the victim of Munchausen. Mike, that is fair. Mike called me, and like I said, you'll never see this. This is, a zebra without stripes,
right.
A unicorn, whatever you want to call it. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, this is all I do, and right. I've been doing it 25 years, and you don't see Munchausen by proxy or fictitious disorder opposed by another very often. Okay. And I've evaluated some others who in family or criminal law cases have been suspected to have it. But to have a full-blooded Munchausen case, it is extremely rare. With that said, though, once Mike had contacted me, about this situation, I have a pretty busy caseload, and I said, Mike, I'm going to get to it. And probably 3 months later, I called him. I said, hey, we're ready. And he said, oh my God, we just came up with a plea deal. You won't believe this. And, it was somewhere around I think 10 years. And he said we had to take it. He told me about it. Meanwhile, he did send me the records, which I had started to review. And I've also, admittedly, seen some of these, Gypsy Rose specials, and had looked at some of the discovery, and I was aware of the medical history of her, or what was, I would say, in much part fabricated by the mother, and also had watched and looked at some of the medical records and the physicians who had treated Gypsy, who had concerns as to a Munchausen case.
So here, he states that by the time he could get back to review Gypsy's case, she had already accepted her plea deal. And so he does admit to watching her documentaries or some of her documentaries. And he states that he did look at some of her medical records, or he started to review them. But pretty much when she accepted that plea deal, folks, he wasn't reviewing her records any longer. He had moved on. He already he stated right here himself that he had a heavy caseload. And it took him a few months before he could even, from the time that Mike Stanfield contacted him originally on this case to the time he could actually get around to review her case, there was about 3 months that passed. So, obviously this guy had a heavy caseload. And by the time he reached back out to him, they had already accepted the plea deal. I guarantee you he moved on to the next case. He wasn't trying to sit down and review all these medical records that Bree claims she has. Gypsy said that she's got hundreds of medical records. Bree says she has thousands of medical records, and I've heard Bree describe them anywhere from 6,000 pages to 10,000 pages. And I promise you, these medical experts, I guess they would be medical experts. They are not going to sit there and review all these records and not get compensated for it. Or, especially since she's not going to trial. What would be the purpose? But this guy actually did talk to Gypsy, and it was around 2022, 2023. She was still in prison, and she was getting ready to be released. She was on, looking forward to her release date. And he interviewed her for Prison Confessions. She did a little documentary right before she got out. It's the one before Life After Lockup, called Prison Confessions on Lifetime. And he interviewed her either in episode 1 or episode 2. There's 6 episodes of Prison Confessions, and he was either in 1 or episode 2. I'm not sure. But he interviewed her, and I'm going to go for it's all for show, because there was really no point at that time for him to even be involved with her. And so I'm going to, just say, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it was all for show. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So let's continue talking to Rogie.
He never looked at her medical records. He
is the leading expert in the country. There's really...
You're correct, but he never looked at her medical records. He said in Mommy, Dead, and Dearest that he researched the internet on this case.
But then he wrote a book, and I think he did research the case before he wrote that book.
Okay, let me pause it right there real quick, okay? Just for clarification purposes, this is Dr. Mark Feldman, okay? And he did write a book. Now, Mommy, Dead, and Dearest came out in 2016. And this is a news article from the Springfield News Leader. This was the local newspaper in Springfield, Missouri. And it is dated May 17th, 2018. So 2 years almost exactly to the day of Mommy, Dead, and Dearest coming out. I think it's actually 2 years to the day of Mommy, Dead, and Dearest coming out. He wrote this book. But it's not really about Gypsy per se. But let's go ahead. And he says, it says, Greene County's Gypsy Blanchard case is mentioned in a new book about medical deception. Mark Feldman, an author and clinical professor of psychiatry, is set to release a book titled Dying to Be Ill, True Stories of Medical Deception. Feldman followed the Blanchard case closely and gave interviews to the News Leader and other outlets about whether Gypsy Blanchard was a victim of Munchausen by proxy. And he did. He gave interviews everywhere that would, I guess, interview him. Okay. His book was released May 24th, 2018. This is Dying to Be Ill. And so this is the book that Rogie's referring to. Okay, let's go back and...
I think he actually took back on a lot of, he supposedly took back some of his words, but I don't know for certain on that. I know Ashley Baby did a video on that, but I'm not for certain on that, but I do know in Mommy, Dead, and Dearest, he stated right there that he never looked at her medical records. He researched it on the internet.
And that's what people do. They take that one line that the man said. They take that one case ever.
Well, he did research on the case, but it was on the internet, just like we all have. He never looked at her medical records. That's what I'm telling you.
But we don't know to date that that's true, is what I'm saying. We don't know to date if that's true.
Has anybody?
Why don't you ask him?
Has anybody paid him to look at her medical records? Because they don't do it for free. Expert witnesses do not do stuff for free. They don't interview for free, and they don't testify for free.
What they do is they extend their research off of a case like Gypsy's. So yes, they will research the case to learn from this case.
Okay, I'm going to pause it right there. So here I'm telling Rogie that Dr. Feldman, the leading expert in Munchausen by proxy, never reviewed Gypsy's medical records. That he admitted that in her documentary, Mommy, Dead, and Dearest. Rogie questioned whether Dr. Feldman had reviewed her records to date because he wrote a book. I asked if anyone paid him to review her medical records because they don't do it for free. And he states that experts would do extensive research based off of her case. So this is a screenshot where I, just looked up and asked if expert witnesses are typically paid for their interviews and their testimony. And basically they are paid for their time. The payment structure, it includes hourly rates or flat fees. It just depends, and it fluctuates. That's on interviews. And the average rate for an interview is anywhere from $200 to $800. It just depends on the field, the expertise, and of course what's going on. And the same thing for the testimony. It kind of all falls into the same, but they get paid for their time. And, because it takes time away from their day and usually their normal job or what have you. And so they usually get paid for their time. I mean, even jurors get paid for their time sitting on a jury. I mean, it's not much. It's like $12 a day or $20 a day or whatever it is, but they still get paid for their time. And I have an example here. If I can find them. Here he is. This is Dr. Ken Kinsey, and he is a crime scene reconstruction expert, and he testified during the Alex Murdaugh trial for the state, and he didn't work for free. He's in law enforcement, and like I said, he is the crime scene reconstruction expert. He's supposed to be an expert in like firearms training and all that good stuff. And he was really interesting to watch. I actually like him, and he's really interesting to watch in the courtroom, especially when he's, testifying and he's doing this thing. I really enjoyed watching him. But this is him on the witness stand. And the state asked him, are you being compensated, or did you get compensated for your time? And he said, I sure am.
Are you being compensated for your time?
I am, yes, sir.
And how much have you been paid thus far, and how much you hope to get paid before it's all said and done?
Well, I'm a Baptist, so if I didn't charge something, my friends and family would talk bad about me. But my retainer is $2,500, and I have a flat $100 an hour rate. And when I added it up, I was up a little over 100 hours. But I ended my retainer myself without anyone asking me to do a little over a week and a half ago. And I'm now working off of a mutual aid agreement that my sheriff's allowing me to do that, Sheriff Leroy Ravenel from Orangeburg.
Sure.
So I'm not charging anything from a little bit before last week on.
So 100 hours, $100, is that?
That's roughly, I have expended roughly, not all of it was daytime, but if I take off, I have to use personal leave from work to do this work. So roughly 75, 80 hours I have used of time from work.
Okay, so you've made $7,500, $10,000?
Well, I've spent way more than that running up and down the highways, Mr. Griffin. I've probably been to 20 meetings or so, but yes, sir, if you look at it that way.
Okay. Now, Doug, back to...
So Dr. Kinsey works in law enforcement, and you can see that his time is valuable. Do you honestly think Dr. Mark Feldman, is going to research her medical records thoroughly without some kind of compensation? I mean, I don't think he's going to, they would put that much time and effort researching, especially if she's accepting a plea deal. I mean, they're not going to put that much time and effort into it and not get paid. I promise you that. Let's finish watching this clip.
Research her medical records.
Yes.
How do you know that? You're
Extensively.
speaking like it's factual, but how do you know any of it?
They're not going to put that much time into it and not get paid, Rogie, is what I'm telling you.
Because the lady, the podcast she just went on, that she just went on.
Don't even get me started on that discredibility right there. My goodness gracious.
I enjoy that you discredit her, but she sits on the board with those, like she convenes, she communicates with those doctors. With
So
Dr.
what?
Feldman, Dr. Fabian, that
So
other
what?
lady, these I'm
But guess
sorry,
what?
Pancake, that these
honey,
people are
that doesn't-
experts.
Right. The people are the experts. That
they
broad is
they
simply
never reviewed
riding
the
on the
medical
coattails of her sister's abuse. She herself is not an expert. In fact, she's not educated in that at all. At all. I did a deep dive on that chick because I was very curious what her credentials are. Surprise, she has none, except she's got a little bit of bragging rights because she talks to experts. Guess what? So do I. That don't make me any better than you or anybody else up here. She is not educated in the matter. Period.
That's,
Christy Blanchard got on Mommy Dead and Dearest.
So if you sit down, like if they sat down, so I'm assuming she did. I don't think she'd go in like she has a pretty popular podcast. I don't think she'd go in half cocked. So like she sat down with these people. If she sat down and was educated, you're telling me she doesn't have an educated opinion to give? Yes.
Well, if she has an educated opinion with the research that she did, why isn't our opinion educated enough to be taken into consideration? And I promise you, we've all done more research than she has. I promise you that. Do you know that she doesn't even know that Gypsy had a microdeletion? Did you know that? Did you know that? Honest question.
Yeah, I doubt she read all the text messages and emails and videos and.
Because none of that matters. That's why.
It does matter. Why would the police gather this evidence if it didn't matter?
None of that matters.
Honestly, Rogie, if nothing else, her microdeletion can come in as at least a mild defense.
Gather this evidence if it didn't matter.
If nothing else, her microdeletion can come in as at least a mild defense for her. Because it does affect how she moves and her actions.
If Gypsy would have
if nothing else,
she would be in prison right now.
So the microdeletion does matter, Rogie. It's a very significant piece of this story, especially when it comes to the medical part.
She's lucky she didn't go to trial with the evidence that's coming.
Affect how she moves and if nothing else.
She would be in prison right now.
So it's a very significant piece of this story. Especially when it comes.
She's lucky she's coming out now. And no, you're right, Rogie. Nothing's going to happen. With all this stuff that's coming out, she's not going to go back to prison. Nick's never getting out of prison out now. And no, you're right, Rogie. Nothing's going to happen. With all this prison, Nick's never getting out of prison. It's done. The case is closed. The truth is coming out now because she's lied for 10 years. She sold us a damn lie for 10 years.
And that's okay, Rogie. It's okay that she lied. I think she got caught up in it. I really do. I think they were like, this happened, that happened. And she's like, yes. I'll say whatever. I'll do whatever.
That is your ass moment is what it was.
That is only one side of the internet's narrative. That's not everybody.
I'm just saying, but Rogie, The truth is coming out, and it's okay. You don't have to fight. You all don't have to fight it.
Hey, Rogie, what was Dee Dee's side of the story? What was Dee Dee's side of the story? Can you tell me what Dee Dee's side is? Because we've heard gypsies for 10 years. What was Dee Dee's side of the story?
I don't know.
You're right. Why? Why don't you know what her side is?
You know why.
Did
Yeah,
Christy
I do know
tell
why.
you what
You
she
know
did
why.
with Dee Dee's journal? Did Christy ever tell you what she did with Dee Dee's journal or Dee Dee's diary?
No.
Did she ever talk about that? Yeah, you should ask her. I wonder what she did with it.
Y'all act like she got killed in a car accident. This woman was brutally murdered while she slept in her bed at 2:30 in the morning. And it was because of your girl. Your girl did that. Put her on Nick's radar.
I'm going to stop it there. First of all, I'd like to thank Keish for letting me go up on her panel. That was the first time I'd ever been up on TikTok. I don't really like TikTok because of the fact of how it I don't know what happens. I don't know if it starts buffering or whatever during the lives, but you see how it pauses and then it sounds like we're over talking each other, but it repeats each other. I'm not quite sure what happens there, but this isn't my recording. This is actually somebody else's recording. And so that's one of the reasons why I don't really like TikTok and the fact that of the censorship. But I do appreciate Keish. Thank you for letting me come up on your panel. That was the first time I'd ever been up on a panel on TikTok, or panel period, actually, for an extensive time. I was a little nervous. Shout out to Pancakes. I appreciate you covering that Andrea Dunlop, because I haven't really done any research on her at that particular time when I came up on this panel. I hadn't even really listened to the podcast. I actually have listened to the first episode, but I haven't listened to part 2, and I really don't care to. But thank you, Pancakes, for covering Andrea Dunlop for me, because I didn't have the background information on her. So you helped me out there. And thank you again, Keish, for letting me come up on your panel. And I will admit that I was a little agitated here, because with everything coming out now, I've not found any evidence, and I don't think anybody else has yet, for that matter, that supports Gypsy's narrative that she has told to the public for the last 10 years. These people refuse to look at the evidence that's coming out now. And I have a question for the pro-Gypsy side. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of going through the documents and watching the videos that have been released? At least you could be on the same playing field instead of getting on panels and not having a clue what you're talking about. This clip here that I'm going to play for you happened this past Tuesday, and this was on Key's panel.
Not the videos. Not the videos. What are the videos, Rogie? What are the videos?
Okay, you gonna let me talk or not?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, good. All right, the first FOIAs that came out, that was evidence that went before the Supreme Court of Missouri. It went before a different appeals court, and they did not. All y'all talk about, they did not see enough evidence. A panel of judges. Hold on. A panel of judges did not agree with anybody on TikTok, anybody on YouTube, or anybody anywhere for that matter. You're talking about the best of the best in the country. Okay, hold on. If one court got it wrong, okay, I understand that. Okay, one court might have got it wrong, but the second court's supposed to correct that wrong, and then it went to a third court. So these documents have,
which is it's harder every fucking time because they don't go over the shit. It's not a trial.
These documents have at least seen 3 courtrooms.
It was never a trial.
How is your wife an attorney and you don't know the basic shit?
I know. I know a judge has to review the evidence. I know judges have.
So the judge in Gypsy's case did not review everything that's being released now. And that's what they were basically talking about in this clip. And it was Starlight and Rogie going back and forth. Rogie just doesn't have a clue. He spits out what Bree or Sheena or Gypsy's told him. He doesn't do any research on his own. He just kind of spews whatever he's heard in maybe their Discord or on their lives or whatever the case is. And like I said, he is personal friends with Gypsy, and so it's hard telling what she's even told him, but he has no clue. And so Starlight was trying to, talk to him here, but I mean, I don't know. But anyway, I can promise you that all the evidence that's being reviewed, right now was not reviewed by the court to determine her plea deal. They didn't review all these videos that we've been reviewing, and they didn't review all the documents that's coming out now as far as her Facebook file. She has, in just her Gypsy Rose Blanchard account, she's got 23,000 pages. I guarantee you they didn't review all those. And then you got the Snow Gyp Blanchard account. Then you have the D Gyp Blanchard account. Then you have the Demona Love Slave account. I mean, they didn't review all this stuff. I showed you in the last video about her plea agreement what they probably reviewed, that little handful of papers that Mike Stanfield had in Mommy Dead and Dearest, and the one little section where it's highlighted where Dr. Bernardo Flasterstein said he suspected she had Munchausen's by proxy, but he didn't report it, but he suspected it. And so that's what her keep me out of the prison for the rest of my life card came in, was that little highlighted sentence right there. And the fact that when they arrested her, when they were looking for her, when this case first broke and she was just missing, they were looking for a handicapped, wheelchair bound, sickly woman or individual, and that's not what they arrested. And so that kind of helped out in her favor, because obviously things weren't, they were like, what in the world's going on? She's, they didn't think she could walk, and here she's walking into the courtroom. And so here Rogie is confusing the cases again, because he's talking about Nick's case. Nick's case is the one that's gone through, Nick went to trial, and he's had several appeal attempts, and they've all been denied. And that's what Rogie's talking about. Gypsy accepted a plea deal. She didn't go to trial. So there was very limited evidence reviewed in her case. And the only evidence I'm aware of that was, initially in Nick's case was the text messages, the crime scene photos, and the emails that was going back and forth between him and his friends. That's all I remember seeing in his actual trial. Now, as far as this appeal paperwork, some of this stuff, not all of this stuff was even, hasn't even been reviewed by the judges in his case. And that is to include the appeals judges. Specific evidence was listed in his appeals paperwork, and whatever that specific evidence was, I know one specific video was dated May 26, 2014, and that was the video where she's telling Nick that she can walk and that she kept it from Dee Dee for 13 years. That was in Nick's appeals paperwork. And had he won his appeal and maybe got a new trial, that might have been considered evidence. That would have been that would have been entered into as evidence because it was listed in his appeal paperwork. But not everything in this case would have been reviewed by the judge. And so that's where, Rogie's wrong on that. He's just wrong. And so here's a clip of Bree explaining how Munchausen's by proxy is diagnosed.
If a person's dead, a professional can have a professional opinion, and a professional they can give their opinion on a diagnosis and say that they believe that Dee Dee had that. Why? Because when it comes to Munchausen by proxy, do you know that the perpetrator is the least important part of the diagnosis? You want to know why? Because they lie. So why would they even, they're going to lie. No perpetrator of Munchausen by proxy is going to be like, yeah, I'm doing this. No, you know who's the most important thing is the medical records, Gypsy, and family and friends statements. The last part of a diagnosis for Munchausen by proxy that's not even needed is the perpetrator. FYI.
So here is a clip of Bree. She loves to bring up Dr. Mark Feldman because he's considered the leading expert in Munchausen's by proxy.
Let me just mute you for a second, Sheena. Is that you? Yeah. On someone's panel saying, she was all confident. She's like, I have the medical records and I proved that Munchausen by proxy was not the case. Girl, you have 300 pages for one. You don't have thousands. You have 300 pages. For two, I can promise you one thing. The expert in Munchausen by proxy, the leading expert of the United States of fucking America. Okay, sweetheart. I don't know where you live. I don't think you live in the United States of America, but here, are you the leading expert in wherever you are? I don't know. I don't think you are probably. But the one here looked at all of her records, not just 300 pages like that you have, My Little Pony 333. But he's looked at all of them, and he said it's one of the most severe cases that he's ever seen in his professional opinion, as the leading expert. So until you get that status, yeah, you might want to sit down, but you're over there on Wikipedia like a weirdo.
So here she's saying that Dr. Mark Feldman reviewed all of Gypsy's medical records. Okay. All of Gypsy's medical records. This is what she's saying. So I took this clip from Becca Scoops' last regular video, not her lives, but her last regular video, and I'm going to provide a link in the description box to that video. But I took this from her video, and it's from what they call the Thought Catalog. It's terrifying Facebook post leads to discovery of brutally murdered mother and her missing disabled daughter. And it was by MJ Pack. And this is actually initially when the case first broke. This was a reporter that was going to cover the case, and she was like journaling her thoughts and her whatever she was doing from I think it was from the 15th on, from June 15th, 2015 on. She was, jotting down daily, whatever, like whoever she interviewed, whoever she talked to, whatever her thoughts were, whatever the case was. And so on June 19th, 2015 at 11:24 a.m. Central Standard Time, she said, "This morning I conducted an interview with international expert in fictitious disorder, Munchausen syndrome, Munchausen by proxy, and malingering, Dr. Mark D. Feldman, author of the book Playing Sick." And so Dr. Feldman said he became aware of the story possibly being connected to Munchausen by proxy, but initially dismissed it, as Munchausen by proxy is not often connected to murder. He also mentioned that Gypsy's appearance convinced him that she was probably actually sick and or disabled, as so many of us did. And so, like I said, she initially started this in 2015, but she came back and she updated it December 14th, 2020. And so I don't know if that's when she added the second paragraph or what. But it says, when I reached out to him, he looked at the case and he is now able to add his expertise to the situation. Dr. Feldman believes that Dee Dee Blanchard most likely had both Munchausen by proxy disorder and malingering by proxy. In the past, these two were not often diagnosed together, as the distinction between them is whether the gain is for money or attention and sympathy. However, a subject's desire for these things can wax and wane, resulting in both disorders at once. And so, like I said, Becca's covered this in her last regular video. And so I'll link that in the description box. So that way you can go and watch that for yourself. And she can explain that better. But that was initially what his thought was. He thought at first she wasn't really sick or what have you. And so this is an excerpt from Mommy Dead and Dearest that Dr. Mark Feldman interviewed for. And if you remember the clip that I played for you earlier, Gypsy said everyone had already interviewed for this documentary by the time she went to court to accept her plea deal. So that means he would have given his interview before July 5th, 2016, and it premiered in May 2017.
As soon as I was aware of the case, I started searching the internet and trying to acquire all the information I could. And it became one of the least difficult cases I've ever seen in establishing this as Munchausen by proxy, which is when people make others under their control either sick or lie about their illnesses or exaggerate their illnesses, all to get some kind of emotional gratification for themselves.
So here, he didn't say he reviewed her medical records. He said as soon as he heard about this case, he jumped on the internet and started researching it. So it had nothing to do with reviewing her medical records or whatever. Okay. And so this is an excerpt from the Springfield newspaper dated July 6, 2016. This is an article that was published the day after Gypsy accepted her plea deal. Okay. And like I said, Mark Feldman had already done his interview with Mommy Dead and Dearest by this point. And it says Munchausen expert says Gypsy Blanchard case is unprecedented. A national Munchausen by proxy expert told the news leader this week he's never seen anything like the Blanchard murder case, and he's curious what would have happened if it had gone to trial. And this article was July 6, 2016, okay? It says Feldman said he was never contacted by her attorneys involved in this case, but he was interviewed by HBO, which is working on a project involving the Blanchard case. So Mike never reached out to him. And so this guy had nothing to do with Gypsy. HBO reached out to him. So that means he was paid for this interview by HBO for starters. And he didn't research her case, and he didn't research it extensively or thoroughly or anything. He basically got on the internet and he, did what we've all done. And, he's only got one side of the story. But, okay, so, let's just continue on. And so this is an excerpt from the Springfield newspaper dated January 22nd, 2018, regarding Dr. Mark Feldman. Okay. Says, with all those interviews, is Gypsy Blanchard just doing what her mother taught her? And this is, like I said, dated January 22nd, 2018. And it was updated January 27th, 2019. But Feldman has never examined Gypsy Blanchard, but said that based on the known facts of her case, he feels comfortable in opining that she was the victim in a long-running medical child abuse scenario perpetrated by her mother, who was found dead of stab wounds in June 2015. And so it says he feels comfortable in opining that she was the victim in a long-running medical child abuse scenario. And opining means offering his opinion. And he feels comfortable in offering, he's never examined Gypsy. He's never looked at her medical records, but he feels comfortable in giving his opinion about this. Okay, that's fine. He researched the internet just like we all have. And we all have an opinion, and I guess he's entitled to have his opinion too. I don't like the fact that, Rogie wants to sit up there on a panel talking about, I'm going to believe the experts because they're an expert in this case. Well, that's all well and good, but they haven't done anything more than what we've done. In fact, I agree with Pancakes in this. We've probably done more research than they have. Okay, and so here's another excerpt. This was dated January 6, 2024. It's from today. He states again that he didn't treat Gypsy. It says Munchausen by proxy condition in Gypsy Rose Blanchard documentary explained. Gypsy Rose Blanchard and Munchausen by proxy. During Gypsy Rose Blanchard's trial, lawyers said she was a victim of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which she didn't go to trial. She accepted a plea deal. Although her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, was never formally diagnosed, which she wasn't, while she was alive, according to local paper, the Springfield News Leader, many experts suspect she had the disorder. I think it's incontrovertible that it was a case of Munchausen by proxy as well as other things, says Feldman. Feldman did not treat Gypsy Rose Blanchard and has not spoken to any of her family members of Blanchard's family. And this again was January 6, 2024. So Bree said, in order to diagnose Munchausen by proxy, you don't necessarily need the perpetrator because they don't necessarily tell the truth. And so they can, she doesn't necessarily need to be diagnosed, but, it says Dee Dee was never formally diagnosed with this while she was alive. And you can't diagnose a dead person. You really can't. But but that was Bree's thing. She doesn't need to they don't necessarily need the perpetrator because she's a known liar per se. So what they do is they need Gypsy, they need her medical records, and they need the family, friends, and whatever. So here we've got 3 different articles, and Dr. Feldman says, I never reviewed her medical records, I never treated her, and I never talked to her family and friends. So, you know, that's where, you know, that's what we've got so far. And so he's really done no more than what we have as far as, I mean, he's researched the case. You know, he's gotten on the internet just like we have. Right? And so, you know, I was just curious to see if Dr. Feldman, because it seems like he's jumped on all these websites and given all these interviews, right, about Gypsy Rose and her case. And so I was just curious if he mentioned her on his website, and he actually didn't. But I did find it interesting that his contact information is turned off or closed until further notice. And so he says, please do not phone unless invited to do so, and unsolicited calls will not be returned. Dr. Feldman is available to the media for print interviews only. And I found that interesting. So I'm not quite sure what the deal is there, but, you know, he's not willing to talk to anybody. And I kind of wonder if it has to do with this case because of the fact the evidence that's coming out in this case doesn't match Gypsy's narrative. And so, you know, I'm not trying to disrespect Dr. Mark Feldman, but this man did not speak with Gypsy Rose. He did not review her medical records, and he never spoke with any of Gypsy's family. He admits that as soon as he heard about this case, he immediately started researching the internet. Pancakes was right regarding some of us doing a lot more research on this case than what Dr. Feldman did. I feel like the only difference between me and Dr. Feldman is the fact that he has doctor at the front of his name and MD behind it. Now, don't get me wrong, he knows a lot more about Munchausen's by proxy than I do. I'm not trying to take his title of expert, but what I'm trying to tell everyone is that this man gave his opinion about Gypsy's case based only on Gypsy's side of the story. I asked Rogie in an earlier clip what Dee Dee's side of the story was, and he laughed at me. I wasn't laughing. I was as serious as a heart attack. We only have one side of the story, and that's Gypsy's side. I feel like I have researched more than Dr. Feldman, but because I don't have doctor in front of my name, my opinion isn't validated. I have reviewed just about this entire case file. In fact, one of my followers called me a walking encyclopedia when it comes to this case, because you can ask me a question, I usually can blurt out the answer. I've got it, it's like ingrained in my head because I've been covering it for 2.5 years. I haven't been covering it for 2.5 years on YouTube, but I've been debating it over on Facebook for 2.5 years. And I mean, the dates, everything is just like embedded in my head. And so, I've been following this case and researching this case. And, like I said, just because I don't have doctor in front of my name, my opinions, it's not validated or it's not valuable. So you guys tell me what you think. I don't know. Leave your thoughts in the comments for me, because I'm just curious to see what everybody else's opinion is. I mean, with the pro Gypsy people, I don't really care if you're friends with Gypsy or not. That's not my problem with you. My problem is the fact that the truth is coming out and y'all want to sit there and laugh about it, but you're scared to look at it. Why are you scared to look at it? Because, to sit there and to go up on panels and not even know what the hell you're talking about, that's crazy. You look foolish. You need to at least look at the same stuff we're looking at, because you need to be on the same playing field. Right now, you're not on the same playing field. I don't care if you know Gypsy personally or not. That's the problem. We've only had her side, and she's a liar. We've proved her to be a liar. I don't care what she's like now. Her patterns to me haven't changed. But see, I'm not attached personally to her or emotionally to her. And so I see things a little differently. Like I said, You guys let me know what you think. Leave your comments for me. And as always, I appreciate everyone's support. If you enjoy the content, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I will be sure to link those articles in the description box for those that would like to read them in full. This will do it for me. I hope you all have a nice evening and a great week ahead.
Witness you wish to call?
Gypsy Blanchard, Judge.
Ms. Blanchard, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give in the cause now pending before the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Sir.
Please tell us your name.
Gypsy R. Blanchard.